Everybody being here, thank you. Have a clicker or some sort of. That you're here to set this up. As we all know, power corrupts, PowerPoint corrupts, absolutely. Tough crowd this morning, note to self, make that funnier. All right, you recording good? Levels all right? All right, very good.
Oh, sorry, every time somebody joins on,
They're gonna.
I can mute them once they're joined, but we might be hearing those beeps. I don't know why this will happen, but today it is.
I'm thrilled you are coordinating.
So as per Mark's generous introduction, I am Geoff Maas. I'm MetroGIS coordinator at the Metropolitan Council. I'll talk a little bit about what MetroGIS is here shortly, and I'm here today to share with you the we're calling Metro's Stormwater Geodata project. So no, not working. What do we do here?
It had a little green. Could just be that we're out of juice here. What's in the off position? Green batteries saying. All right. Well, I can just.
Does it have to point to a certain corner of
I
the
can.
screen?
Oh, you know what? I bet you it's me. Now, okay. Now try it.
There we go.
It
Okay,
was
good.
me. It was me.
Okay, no problem. Awesome. So in the short time we have together this morning, there's 7 points. I want to make a few of them shorter than others. So what is MetroGIS? What is the project? What are we doing? Why are we doing it? What have we done so far? What's next? And hopefully have a chance to respond to your questions and take some comments if you have them. So what is MetroGIS? It's a voluntary collaborative interest that works together in the Metro region to define shared needs. We develop standards and best practices for GIS. We standardize and share data, and we define and carry out projects meeting our shared interests. I'm proud to say the chair of our coordinating committee is your very own Eric Dahl back here. He's been our chair for a number of years. So thank you, sir, for showing up and keeping me on the level here. And what we do is,
Go ahead.
is it? Okay.
Yeah, so I'll just to clear. So every time someone like chats something in the chat box, I have to click on it, and then I have to re-click back on your PowerPoint in order for you to do your thing.
Okay.
So we're gonna.
I am in your capable hands.
Yeah, it's gonna work out. It's gonna be bumpy.
Okay. Should the ceiling open up and I just dissolve into a pile of ash, it's on you. Anyway, so MetroGIS is hosted by the Met Council. We are, like I said, a voluntary collaborative. We're sort of an interesting. I like to say we're sort of like the Vatican City inside of Italy. I have the distinction as the MetroGIS coordinator as working at the Met Council, and all my colleagues work for the Met Council. The Met Council actually sends a delegate to MetroGIS, so we're very much like sort of a neutral place where we can all work together in a region, and I help coordinate that. And so we have represented partners from all levels of government, from the private sector. We have representatives from utilities and real estate, the academic sector, and the nonprofit sector as well. We maintain an annual work plan, so each fall we basically take in any new projects and we look at the progress of our current projects, we assess them, and then we create a new work plan for the next year and create priorities of what we're going to work on. So there's no shortage of ideas, but we have to sort of triage and understand that as a voluntary collaborative, there's only so much time and in-kind resources we can rely on. So we have a policy board. I have which we convene once a year. We have county commissioners, city council persons. We have one of the Met council persons comes to that. We have a couple of county CIOs, and we have a board chair from one of the watershed districts. And so once a year, we bring what we're working on to them and show what we're working on. And actually, we try to make that real show and tell how we're working together to build really good things with geospatial data. Our coordinating committee, which is senior managerial technical staff, so each county sends their manager, and other sort of senior staff from cities in GIS and also from watershed districts and, as I mentioned, utilities and real estate. And then we create project teams of usually anywhere from 6 to 12, sometimes more, sometimes less, to take on any of the projects we have. And so we have sort of, as we have some of our data sets that are in maintenance, we have ongoing teams that sort of tend to their care and feeding. We have an identity on Minnesota Geospatial Commons, and we have any of these data sets that we produce that are regionally federated from many governments. We put them under the MetroGIS banner and put them up there. So we have tax parcel data all the way back to 2002. And a number of other data sets that we have, I'll be talking about shortly. So we are the folks that bring you these data sets if you are making use of them. We have standardized parcels across the metro that are updated every quarter. So January, April, July, and October. We have, and our newest data set is parks and trails. We're still working on this and developing this, but it's actually in pretty good shape. We update that twice a year. January and July will be the next update. We have a road centerline data set, and you can see we've included Chisago and Isanti counties, and actually we literally just this week added Sherburne County to that as well. We have the scripts available that can be updated nightly. Anytime the counties propagate an update, we can harvest that, pull it together, run validation, and push it up. And we have the same with the address points as well. So we're looking at about 1.2 million unique address points in the 9 and soon to be 10 county area here that we serve with that. So our agencies are, MetroGIS is responsible for the care and feeding of these data sets. And we have our own website. As I mentioned, we are at the council, and so council, obviously we're under their flat banner, but we have our own logo and our own identity, so we can kind of maintain that. So what is the Stormwater Project? The main thing I came to talk to you about today. It's a voluntary multi-agency effort to clearly define the business needs for stormwater geodata transfer standard, and then develop, test, refine that standard so it meets the various needs of a very broad stakeholder community. I don't need to tell this agency much about the nuts and bolts of it. You're obviously very well versed in it, but there's lots of stuff, man-made, natural, that conveys, stores, impounds, deals with stormwater. And our challenge is to develop a virtual model in GIS to be able to represent these complex features and have a shared set of terminology to describe these things. And so we do that in GIS using points and lines and polygons, and so we are, let that get more of a laugh, we're just sort of maybe not fully caffeinated yet. Anyway, so we are trying to meet the challenge of how to do this so we can create a standard so we can share this across jurisdictions. As a really good example, we have the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District, which our watershed districts, even though they snap to parcel boundaries, generally align, obviously, with the natural watershed area. And you can see in Minnehaha Creek, you've got 24, 25 unique city jurisdictions, each of whom is creating their stormwater geospatial data in a different format. And so having a standard that we can translate that into would be extremely helpful for a watershed district, for regional agencies, for state agencies that need to manage water on a level larger than a municipal boundary. And so we have a diverse set of stakeholders around our table in both professional fields, everything from engineering, flow modeling, geospatial folks, public works, planning, landscape architecture, resource management, and also a mix of agencies represented, federal agencies, states, we have regional folks, county, municipalities, watersheds, and so on. From your agency, you've been sending Rachel. Rachel's been showing up at our meeting, and Carly as well, made a couple of meetings as well. So we're very grateful to have the PCA at the table to kind of keep an eye on what we're doing. And I think the more input and the more review we have on this, the better, both in its formative stage and its review stage. So what are we actually doing? We are, as I said, documenting the business needs, developing a schema to meet those needs. We're going to be testing that schema. That's the next set of activity coming up. And then a robust program of outreach and engagement. And so we had, a little bit over a year ago, a big, we call the Stormwater Geodata Summit. We took over the emergency management room at Hennepin County's Public Works Center out in Medina. We trailed our coats as well as we could. We got about 60-some people out there, and we had some presentations. We did some small group breakout stuff, and we got a massive wall with post-it note sticky wall of ideas of things people needed from stormwater data. And then I did a presentation at HR Green for the, get this right, Central States Water Environment Initiative, and they said, could we do that here? So we did a pop-up with event with about 30 people here and got some additional comments as well. And actually throughout the entire process, we continue to discover new business needs that people have for this. As I said, we do kind of these small breakout groups. We hit folks with hypothetical questions. We try to find out what their agency needs, and then we document that. And that's everything from I do flow modeling to my city council doesn't understand the value of geospatial data to emergency response in case there's a spill, and everything in between. We have a very robust document of all those that's available on our website, which I'll point you to at the end of the presentation. We have documented the stakeholder needs from the very specific to the very general. From that event, we developed at that time, 25-member steering team. We're sort of wobbling into the 30-some territory now as folks are finding out what we're working on. They want to participate, and we certainly encourage that. I have to keep finding bigger and bigger rooms around the metro to accommodate us all and buy more donuts, so that's okay. We have a project charter, and then we also have a 2-page project summary. All these materials are available on our website, which I'll point you to, as I said, later. And again, one of the things I want to point out is building a data transfer specification to be all things to all people is extremely challenging. There's a whole range of needs on the system. There's folks who are worried about, environment and health, hazard mitigation, folks from a public works stance who are interested in maintenance and tracking and age and capacity, and also infrastructure, the infrastructure capacity with that, to be able to handle large events. And so when we got all those comments, that wall full of hundreds and hundreds of sticky notes, we basically began to put those into categories. And these are sort of the general, large, big picture business cases. And again, 50% or better all share these things. So everything from site determination for BMPs to impact analysis, permit review, compliance, capital improvement projects, work order, construction planning, determination of ownership, asset management, flow modeling, and mapping and visualization. These are the ones that are obviously shared by the most people, but they're all this whole range of things that people see. These are really important for the standard to be able to satisfy. And so our challenge is to develop a schema that helps these people do this work. I'm always looking around the U.S. at other examples of curious business cases. This is the comedy portion of the presentation. In New Orleans, they use their stormwater system very differently than we do. They store jewelry in it. So they actually yanked out 93,000 pounds of Mardi Gras beads, those plastic beads they throw down there. In Florida, their stormwater system forms wildlife habitat, which is fun. You can see an alligator peering at you. I think you can see some rubber ball or something over there. This is another fun one in Harris County, Texas. They actually use their stormwater channels for van parking, which is cool. Don't mess with Texas. My favorite, however, is finally, Hollywood has finally seen the benefit of the stormwater system. So, as providing habitat for Stephen King's creations, Preternatural Killer. So, so again, documenting a full range of business needs so we can satisfy that. So why are we doing it? Again, this is an audience that I don't think I need to belabor this point with. There is a bigger picture here to be examined at. All levels of government deal with water, from the very thinly populated township up to, the dense urban areas in Minneapolis and St. Paul, and surface water, groundwater. There's all kinds of issues that surround water: quality, supply, demand, use, and recharge. And that needs the influence and experience of a diverse set of expertise, from the fiscal and legal and resource, engineering and planning. There's obviously public health and public safety. There's economic aspects to it. If you do not have a suitable water system, you cannot have an economy on top of it. And also technology. Our human agency impacts the landscape. We build things, we tear things down, we move things, and that impacts the water as well. And so our position with this project particularly is we can get good data, we can have good information, we can turn information into knowledge and better do things on the landscape to improve our water quality. So as I said, multifaceted issue within our regional context. This is sort of some of the bigger picture pieces here. It's not specific to the project, but again, we're relying more on groundwater than surface water, and so there's a recharge aspect to it. How can we increase groundwater recharge? We're drawing more down. I don't know if this is the most accurate map. This is, I think, from 2009. There may be a more accurate one now. But again, we're impacting groundwater resources, so being able to facilitate recharge would be a good thing. We are seeing more frequent and more intense storm and rain events. And is our stormwater system, does it have the capacity to attenuate that? This is a little two-page report put out by our friends at the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District a while back, and showing the impacts of, like, we're going to be seeing more of this with larger, more intense, shorter, and heavier rain events. Again, in that vein, I showed one of these pictures earlier. About 7 years ago in Duluth, they had that massive event when they had to pass a special bill for $167 million to help our friends up in St. Louis County to fix their system. And so having good data about age and capacity and all the features that are in there would be extremely important. Even here in the metro, flash events like this have significant events for, obviously damage to vehicles, damage to infrastructure, impacting the flow of traffic, and you can pick your issue that can be related to this and how it's impacted by these kinds of events. Again, here, the PCA, you enforce the MS4 permits. There's language in those permits that relates to things that we can satisfy with having data. So there's actual language. They're talking about mapping all storm sewer pipes between 12 and 24 inches, and having all the types of activities that go on with that. We feel that having better data would be a good way to help satisfy those requirements. Good. Okay. I've come from a background of urban planning, and so I'm very interested in urban design. And water is going to be the century's great urban design challenge, being able to build cities in such a way that they manage, because we both have precipitation through rain and snow here in Minnesota. And additionally, am I good again? Okay. resilience from major climate events. We've had in the past decade and a half Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Harvey, Hurricane Sandy, and developing cities so they can manage massive water events like this is part of that challenge. For a long time, stormwater was seen as sort of a waste product. Engineering sort of built their structures, engineering thinking was sort of built the structure to convey the water off the landscape as quickly as possible into receiving waters. Well, we now sort of see it more as a resource that can be sort of held, help with groundwater recharge, and building rainwater or rain gardens and VMPs and so on. And there's significant costs, however, in being able to do that with engineering, land use, VMPs programs, regulatory fees as well. But having, again, reliable, high-quality data will help us do that, and we feel geospatial technology is one of the pieces that will support that. There's many other issues. Again, this is an audience that I feel understands that probably pretty well. I won't go through them all, but there's no shortage of issues that can be tied to understanding water. It's complex, it's interrelated, it's interjurisdictional, and again, GIS, we feel, is a suitable way to, there's more data becoming available, more people are building and working with it. It's a way to work together. You get your biologist and your geologist and your regulatory person and together, and GIS can be a way for them to work together. It forms a common dialect. We can explore our shared needs using it. If we have good data that we all can rely on and use, it'll hopefully reduce some costs, and we'll have some efficiency in our actions working together. And so, as Mark mentioned, there was a previous project in 2008 to 2010. There was a development of an initial transfer standard, and actually we're taking many of our cues from that initial work and building from that. And they actually put together a pilot project in the Battle Creek sub-watershed in the Ramsey, Washington Metro Watershed District. So you have I-94 and 694 here in the East Metro around Battle Creek Lake. And that was a very, very telling project for really revealing many of the challenges that were faced in doing this kind of project. So you've got data producers, like a city will know their own data really well, but they may lack the documentation or metadata. There's missing or incomplete data. It's like unverified or it's in progress. You've got unique schemas. As I mentioned, every city's doing it a little bit or a lot of bit different. And then interjurisdictional connectivity is absent. You may have a pipe or something that hits the city boundary and does this with the data. So that's a real challenge for flow modelers. And cross-jurisdictional linking, you needed creative line work to kind of bring things together. You'd have to actually create something so they would flow together. And then data producers concerned about public access to their data, potential for liability. We take that very seriously. If you're a public agency, you want to maximize the benefit of producing this data and having people use it. At the same time, you want to make sure it's not being used, for ill or for other, non-suitable purposes. Pounding the ground. So again, that project was sort of wrapped up in 2010. I came on in 2012, and it was one of the projects that I had inherited, and so other projects were raised to a higher priority, but I started talking with folks about, is this possible? Do you need this? How would this work? And so I spent a couple of years just documenting what people's business cases were, doing some research myself on the topic and making some connections, and then we led up to our event last year. And so when we're talking about this data, we are talking about the conveyance infrastructure, both the man-made and natural features on the landscape, the skeleton, if you will, that carries this stuff. I'm always looking for fun. I think that's in Paris, actually. It's not here in Minnesota. I'm always looking for fun storm drain photos. There's no shortage of them on the internet. But again, the points and lines and polygons that represent all of this stuff. I'm trying to get that together. So we have obviously a challenge of geography. Every one of these municipal units, we have 186 of them in the Twin Cities Metro, 7 counties, and then state, regional, even private systems, 3M campus and McAllister College and U of M, all have their own stormwater systems. How do we pull these together? As you can see, these boundaries do not match these boundaries. Our political boundaries were sort of created between 1860 and 1960, and I like to say all the problems we're trying to solve were kind of created in 1960 onward. So we have this sort of older geography on top of a natural thing here. So that's a challenge to rectify. Again, they're each creating their own data in different formats and schemas, different platforms. Some have CAD, some have GIS, some have Mylars, some have work order systems, some have nothing, in ways where they don't always match the boundaries, as I mentioned, and there's a lack of clarity on what can we share, can we do this. So we're trying to address all those pieces. The example I use to try to describe this is kind of like in the United States in the 1860s. We were expanding the railroad network across the continent, and there were 7 different railroad gauges. So you would get to a state line, and you'd have to pull a train up and crank the wheels over and move them over, so it's not the most efficient flow. Well, in 1862, Congress said 4 foot 8.5 inches is going to be the national gauge. Well, what else was happening in the early 1860s? Half the country said we're seceding, goodbye. And actually, that's part one, some historians theorize it's part of why the South held on as long as it did, because their railroad gauges were different, and it's hard to move, soldiers and material up and down. But by 1886, so 20 plus years to get the railroad gauge standardized. So I use this as an analogy of the kind of thing we're trying to do with this data. But let us not dwell too long on the lesson of history.
So are you sending me the Civil War to solve?
No, we do not need Civil War. Let's not do that. All right, let's avoid that. So, anyway, so again, why we're doing it, to meet those many needs, create a standard, create some documentation to support that standard and clarity on data policies. Again, water does not acknowledge the boundaries that we have. So, Lord of the Rings fans here, this is one of my favorite slides as part of my presentation. If this was easy, we would have done it. This is a real challenge. It's tough to do. So if they could have, instead of just throwing it in the storm drain, instead of marching up, for however long it took them to get up to Mount Doom and throw it in the lava. So again, each agency maintains their own stuff and has their own business needs. And what we're trying to demonstrate as well is there's a return value. So let's say the city of St. Louis Park shares its stormwater data with PCA, with the hydraulic modeler at the U of M, with the Met Council, with a student doing a research project. These folks are going to use that data to do studies and reports that the city didn't have to, essentially pay for. They said, here's our data, use it for things, and there's a return value. Like they may do some free QA, QC checking on the data for the city or whatever. So we're trying to get that idea of getting your data, hopefully getting your data in the standard and out there so folks can work with it and use it. So great, that all sounds well and good. That's all holding hands, kumbaya, let's have all this great data. How are we going to do it, and what have we done so far? So as I said, we've documented business needs. We've got a very, very active steering team that's been working. We've created smaller work groups to address specific pieces of this standard. We've got actually a prototype standard. I have a very threadbare copy of my analog copy of it right here, and I'll talk about the pieces of it shortly. So Rachel's laughing. She's seen this thing sort of grow out of the ground here. And now we've actually selected some pilot study areas to begin building this stuff. As I said, we've had specific stakeholder sessions. We've had our steering committee meeting. We're going to have our 6th meeting here coming up in August. We've got some small group work going on over the summer. But we've been moving, as you can see from the sites, we've been moving the party around the metro. And every agency or usually city or watershed districts that has hosted the meeting, we've given them the first agenda item for them to talk about what they're doing with stormwater in there. So it's been, in addition to working on the project, it's been a chance for folks to come to another jurisdiction or another agency and see what they're doing. You can tour their rain gardens. The Mississippi Watershed Management Organization hosted us at their facility. That's a beautiful facility along the river on Marshall Avenue. And they've got all these great fixtures and water recapture and stuff. In Blaine, we got their water resources person to give us a tour of this wetland area that they had just recently bought. And so it's been a real educational piece for everyone to kind of see how other folks are solving the problem. We've got our small breakout groups. We've got our structures team going to be meeting in June again. Here are some other groups as well. I've been trying to do different variations of presentations as much as I can. I'm going to be talking to the Metro Mod Board and the Water Resources Center in July, and our state GIS conference will be talking about this up there as well. We've got city, county, private, watershed, water management organization, regional, state, federal, and Esri, the big software developer for GIS. They have an office in Eagan. They've been participating, actually hosted one of our meetings, our last meeting in April. So this is where we were up at Blaine touring there. There's a county ditch running right underneath this bridge there. So the irony of people sitting in a meeting looking at pictures of people sitting in a meeting. It's not and again, Esri has been paying attention because this isn't happening anywhere else in the U.S. No one's trying what we're doing with this to create an interjurisdictional standard. And so they've been using us as kind of a guinea pig for their utility network model to sort of see how we're going to integrate with their new deployment pro. So our standard, let's get down to the nitty-gritty here. This is the point you've been waiting for. So we have developed a draft schema for how to represent pipes, how to represent channels, how to represent artificial paths. In points, we have basins, structures, inlet, outlet, outfall, BMPs, monitoring devices, and I'll talk a bit more specific on these two, inlet, outfall, and basin inspection specs, and then polygons. And the polygons are actually really tied to these. We're storing things in the point, and then you can spatially join the points to the polygons. And we have a couple of additional pieces for the polygons there, but the data will be stored in the points. I don't expect you to look at this, but just a quick screenshots of our schema. We have our current draft schema up on our website. It's not done, it's not ready for prime time, but we're being transparent and keeping it out there. We're encouraging folks to comment on it if they want to. We will do a formal outreach to the full community very soon here and solicit comments from folks. But again, we've got our components, our lines, our points and polygons, and then we're working on developing robust domain values to represent those things, to represent all the features within them as well. It is a draft, it's in progress. We're not quite ready, as I said, but we're getting there. One of the things I wanted to mention to this group is that's emerged out of this is a need for a consistent inspection schema for inlet, outfall, and basin inspections. And so what we've done is develop this. Perry Clark is an asset manager and public works guy out in Carver County, and he gathered a whole bunch of different city how they report their inspections and how they get that to you guys. And so we put together a schema of all the best pieces of that. And Rachel, I don't know if you want to take the helm here, but I think we've delivered that to you guys, and sort of folks have been looking at that, or?
Yeah, our MS4 staff and our compliance and enforcement staff have looked at it and reviewed it and provide input, and yeah, I think it looks great.
Yeah, so it would be nice for all of the folks who are doing this out on the landscape to be collecting the data consistently and delivering it to you consistently so you can do more robust, spend less time cleaning the data and more time analyzing. So we're working on that. Similarly, and so we've got, different kinds of domain values for things as well. And again, this is a draft. We're looking for input. We're not saying we're not coming down from Mount Sinai with the stone tablets and saying thou shalt. We're saying, we think this is good, we want more input. We want you to tell us how we can make this better. Similarly, for outlets and outfalls, we have a similar schema for that as well. So we look forward to getting this out there and getting this tested. Also for basins and ponds for inspection. So we hope that folks are all inspecting it with a consistent schema, they'll provide good data. And so we encourage, as I said, ideas, tweaks, recommendations, expansions, or contractions of it as needed. So let us know how that works. So what's next? What are we doing next? So we are going to refine and approve a version of our prototype. We're looking at our August meeting to basically lay hands on this and bless it and say, this is good enough to put out there for other people to start kicking at. So we're going to bless it to test it. And then we're going to test that standard in a pilot project. So what we have done, we've selected a series of 12 pilot areas around the Twin Cities. We're going to begin, actually next week, I'm going to start the process of contacting these cities and other agencies that have stormwater fixtures and say, can we have your data? We're going to translate it into our standard, and we're going to put it out for people to work with, and see how that works. So at our November meeting, I had a short map exercise. I'm a recovering urban planner. I can't help but lay out maps and hand out Sharpies and do a charrette. And basically had groups of 3 and 4 people just start, where do you think we should do a pilot? And folks started selecting areas around here. These are not old French land grants. These are just the areas that folks think that would be a good idea. And you can actually see a lot of them, they weren't working together. They all actually overlap similar areas here. So, and then, so again, and at our February meeting, I made detailed maps of each of those areas, and we broke them into 4 groups and did a further charrette and said, okay, you picked this area, now get really specific within that area. And we resulted with these dozen areas. So we have Chaska, Shakopee, Lotus Lake, West Central, North Central, Round Lake, Eagle Lake, Otter Lake, around MSP International, we're calling this sort of Mendota, South St. Paul, and Pigs Eye here, which actually corresponds very closely to the original project site from 10 years ago. And so our goal then, and we have a shapefile of those things up on our website, and we have a little web map too if you want to go get it. I'll point you to that here shortly. So we're going to collect stormwater system within those pilot areas. We're going to translate that into our approved standard, and we're going to publish those out with a huge stakeholder outreach and basically say, can you test this? If you've got data in this format, would it meet your needs? Can you grip it and flip it and map it and app it and do things with it? If you're an asset manager, can you translate it into your asset management software you need? If you're a flow modeler, can you do flow modeling with this? If you're someone who builds viewer applications or you're doing field inspections, does this work for you? And we're going to put out some structured questions, and we're going to provide opportunity for unstructured responses as well. We want folks to just bang on it. And then we're going to gather all that information up we get back to them and review it and recalibrate the standard from that input in 2020. And we've got a little bit of money to do that. I wrote a small grant from the Water Resources Center. The Ramsey County GIS user group is very interested, as many of these pilot sites are within their county, and so they pool money to buy aerial imagery, and they've got a bit of a surplus, and so they're going to hopefully give us a little bit. And I'm actually encouraging to actually manage the stuff inside of their county if they're interested in doing that. And so we're going to be doing as much outreach as we can while that review is going on to all these various agencies. I'm anticipating 120 to 180 day period. We may expand that if we need to. We're not under a deadline, but I want to make sure everybody gets a chance to look at this and know what we're doing and make it work. So, again, the long-term benefit of doing this, it's been a real, I think, learning opportunity for the participants. We're creating a transfer standard that's created by the community that's going to use it. So the engineers are getting a chance to influence it. The watershed people are getting a chance to use it. Hopefully the state regulators will be able to have a chance to influence it. It's, sort of by us, for us, if you will. It's not coming down from some on high thing. For those agencies that have no data or limited data, like there may be a small city that has, well, we have a stormwater system, we have none of it mapped, this provides a template for them to start mapping it. Or for agencies that need data, like a watershed district, they now will have a resource to be able to write scripts to translate the stuff from their constituent cities into, pull that together. So I said I'd point you to our website. It's very easy to find, metrogis.org, projects, and we have a basically stormwater data set page. It's got our overview information, our charter, and our FAQ. It's got our current stakeholder input. It's got our basic notes from our various work teams and our contact info for our roster of folks who are participating. We have links to our maps of our proposed sites. You can pull down a geodatabase of that if you want to work with that as well. And it's got our draft schemas, and it's got our draft prototype that I waved menacingly in your face here. And again, we've also got versions of the Bowser drainage and DNR culvert specs, which we've been referencing as well. We want to integrate this with existing schemas to make sure that works. And also we have links to all the materials from the 2008 and 2010 study that went on. Again, we're taking our cues from that work that took on. So if you're interested, I can't do this presentation without including the raccoon poop slide, so I have that on every slide now. So if you're interested, please get in touch with me via email. I'm kind of the postmaster and bottle washer for the project. Check out our website. If you're not ready to engage yet, but you want to when we got something ready, I really encourage you to take a look at the materials. Provide input that is encouraging or scathing. We'll take everything. We want to know what people think of it, and let us know if there's someone that you know of who doesn't know about the project who needs to be involved. There's lots of folks that have interest in stormwater and geospatial work, and we want to make sure that folks are aware of this. And so I continue to kind of go out and bang the bushes and let folks know what's happening. So with that, we're doing on time here, but I'm happy to field questions, take comments, receive your vituperations and scathing rebuttal, or if you think of something later, please email me. So happy to look at that. So, the other thing I was going to mention, yes, the last piece here, brought my props. So our structures team is going to probably meet in June. I'm guessing we're going to meet in July as well. We're going to go through as-built drawings like this. I've got a bunch of engineers around the table, and we're basically going to turn the stuff on here into columns in our schema. So we're going to go through this in detail and figure out how much they share and what kinds of things can be lumped together and which can't. So that's going to be a very interesting exercise. There will be a great deal of donuts eaten and coffee gulped and highlighters taken to their extremity. So that's another part of what we're doing. So that's this summer's focus, to get that piece right. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, this is an awesome project and incredibly ambitious, probably long overdue, and I love it.
Well, good, thanks.
But I was just wondering, so for every segment of system out there, conveyance, are you hoping to acquire ownership and legal ownership and operational control of like almost every foot of conveyance?
That is one of the business needs that has been expressed. We are recognizing what a challenge that is, because just because that pipe is in your city doesn't mean the city owns it. And so there is, if we can get at least a base level, we know what city it's in, and there's going to be places, and we'll have a flag on those things, or if there's an easement. And so if we would tell you who owns the easement, but there's a flag, yes, no, unknown, and that would trigger, okay, we have to go to the courthouse and do some records research. So we recognize the limitations of what this is, but we do have that as it would be great to satisfy that business need, but that's a challenge. And having in our schema the ability to flag whether an easement is present is part of that. Yeah, fine.
So assuming everything goes well from here, your pilots go great and so forth, and that your project ends, how does everything get populated after that from all the places that are not in the project area and updated with additional information?
Right, that's a key challenge we have. We feel our first challenge is to get a workable standard, and basically say it's sort of like we've bought a piece of land, we've mined out the iron ore, we've built a metal smelter, and we've created the hammer. And now we want to encourage people to use the hammer, so we're creating the tool, and we're being very planful and thoughtful on how we pull the standard together. And then it will be identifying, okay, maybe we invest in the watershed districts to work with their constituent cities to do this. We may have cities who have no data, and we provide them some grant funding or in-kind services or an intern to say, let's get your data in here and get it maintained. So we want to meet every stormwater, every agency that maintains stormwater infrastructure. We want to meet them where they're at. So a city like St. Paul already got schema, already got their stuff built, very mature. For them, enticing them into, like, maybe twice a year you run a translation script and dump your stuff in, it'd be great. A city that has nothing or has their stuff in CAD, we want to say, okay, let's write a grant to get some stuff together for that. So it's very good. It's very much going to be as I mentioned, meet folks where they're at and see how well would this work with you. And for what we do now with those other data sets I pointed out is the Met Council actually has a small pot of money. We pay each county $4,000 a year to run their scripts at whatever frequency to dump their data into the standards that we've agreed on, and then the Met Council takes it from there. We run validation and we do publishing on it. So we've established very clear roles and responsibilities for each person along the assembly line. The key piece for us is we would never say to anyone, you have to do something for which you don't have a business need. So if you've got a small city that has no business need to use the standard, but they're in a watershed district and within a region and within a state that does, it's incumbent upon us as agencies of higher order to work with them and to get them there. So we do not take you have to use the standard. We do not use that position at all. We're very much in the geospatial world peer-to-peer. The smallest city and the largest agency, let's be eye-to-eye on this data stuff. There's other instances where if they obviously had an illicit discharge, you guys could come in and drop the hammer on them, stuff like that. But with the data, we work very, very hard in the geospatial world to say, we have this need, you are the authoritative source, how do we bridge the gap? That would be the piece, yeah. Sir?
So I just have a comment. I was just reflecting, I think a lot of our jobs here are, as the agency, are kind of the similar work, trying to take agencies that were created in the 1970s when the idea of digital data was inconceivable, and bringing them and trying to standardize that data and find ways to be able to use it. Mm-hmm. And so every part of the agency is kind of dealing with a similar issue of standardizing data and finding ways to actually use data to make decisions. Mm-hmm. So that's just a general comment. So good work.
We're trying.
And the other thing I've noticed is that people don't know how useful this data will be until later.
Yeah.
Right? And then it becomes like incredibly essential. So, these data questions, like it's like not super fun to think about it, but then all of a sudden 5 years down the road, you're able to answer metro-wide GIS spatial data questions that would have been impossible 30 years ago. You can't even think about.
Yeah. The benefit we're seeing is the work we put in on like our road center lines and our address points is the whole 911 world is moving from their tabular logical model CAD dispatch to GIS now, and that's been a big driver for us. Obviously, there's dozens of other uses and needs for that, but the fact that 911 needs standardized data. We need to be able to route an ambulance from Stillwater to Plymouth. We need to be able to route a squad car. There's all this mutual aid stuff going on. We've got to have consistent data, and so having a big, shiny business need like that helps us support that, and we can take it to our elected officials, and they're like, oh yeah, go. And we do this with very, very little money. We don't, you saw the dollar signs in there, we're tens of thousands. We haven't even tapped that money yet to get this done. This has all been in kind, people willing to say, yeah, I'll come to a meeting for 3 hours once every 2 months and bang on it. I think that's the benefit of doing this. We very, very soft touch, non-regulatory, but as you said, once you've got it built and people count on it, it's an expectation, and so that's why we need to have a very strong maintenance tail with this as well, care and feeding and ensure that these stay in place. So, yeah.
I would imagine that in this whole area you're looking at, the data must vary quite a bit.
Yes.
What the amounts, what are the big data gaps that you see now or coming in that might be needed by municipalities and in terms of all their planning and things like that? What are the big ones you see?
Could you make me active? I'm going to take it back to, I don't know if I'm taking back to the map again. So that's a really good question, because there's a lot of cities, they already have data, and they're like, oh, we know our data's crap. And this is sort of giving them a chance to, like, rise to their full height. Let me go back to our pilot area. I can hopefully answer a little better. Gaps are, you've got, as I mentioned before, things not matching up.
Right.
You've got incomplete stuff where it's been, they did a new project and repaired a piece of it, and that got digitized, or an as-built drawing got translated to GIS, and the stuff down the road from it never has in their system. So you've got internal gaps, external mismatch, and two cities next to each other not even calling the same thing. And so we're, in addition to the standard, we're going to be working on a glossary. We'll probably be reaching out to you guys to help review that as well, and some supporting documents, because geospatial people, we look at roads and addresses and parcel stuff, we're not stormwater experts by any means. And so that's why I'm going to be, once we have materials ready for you to review, we want people who have expertise in this field to really, you really shouldn't call it that, you should call it this. We had this big discussion about NERPs. Don't call them NERPs, call them stormwater ponds. I'm like, okay, I don't know. And so I think NERP is kind of fun, goofy words, it's fun to say. So anyway, yeah.
Well, I would think that you just touched on something that would be a real hurdle in, when you're working with all these jurisdictions. I would think you'd run into some resistance on the part of someone that said, we have been down this road, we have our standardized way of doing things, and now you're asking us, albeit not telling us, that we should change this. It's going to take a lot of effort, it's going to take a lot of man hours, and it's going to take a lot of money.
Yeah.
How do we do this? Has that been a point of contention as you develop this?
Well, let me give you an example. So the city of Maple Grove actually has a very mature geospatial system, and they have a fully sort of articulated asset management system to go with it. So they're not going to change to use this standard. However, they're like, we're willing to contribute our data to a regional system. And so the negotiation of like, all right, do we pay you to translate it, or do we build a translator for your data that you run? And so, like as I mentioned, so there's probably going to be a range of solutions. We're going to have like a menu of things. So if you're willing to share your data and have it be part of it, because I think they probably actually want standardized data from the jurisdictions around them for finding, illicit discharges or stuff coming into their city. I mean, water comes in one city and goes out the other. It comes in one and goes back out again. And so they're all interested in doing that, and every time there's updated data, they have to get it and translate it, and having a more formalized means of doing this, I think, would help. So we're working on that. Those discussions are taking place. Yeah, but we're not saying to anybody, stop doing what you're doing and now use this. That wouldn't work. We want to have this tool as a way for at very least the watershed districts to federate it together and work on that. So probably go from there. Other questions? No rotten tomatoes got thrown at me. It was good. I never know what you're going to get. So very cool. So I guess my thing would be watch this space. Probably toward the end of this year, there will be sample data from. I'm hoping a number of these sites. We cast the net pretty wide here. My hope is we can get 3 or 4 of these areas populated with really good data. We've picked sites that have a complex mix of interjurisdictional, interwatershed, MnDOT features, local features, private features, and so on, and receiving waters and so on. So we've picked some juicy areas to get some interesting stuff. We hope we'll be able to deliver that, so we'll see. Anything else? Okay, thank you all for your attention. Appreciate it.